You know, I have been sitting here for the last couple of minutes checking out videos, doing a little bit of research on what's being called critical race theory. And what it reminds me of is back when Trump first got elected and they was trying to push that narrative about black identity extremists. And then they had to drop that because, white boys got to cutting up too bad and they couldn't really push it. But I'm down here in Florida, and Florida just, I think, if I understand it correctly, just banned the teaching of critical race theory in public schools. So my thinking on that is this. First, my understanding of what critical race theory is really just telling the truth about what America really is. Now, if you really know anything about American history, its presidents, its founding, its how it became rich, if you know anything about that, then you know then it was all based on the racist attitudes of white people, white men in particular. I mean, didn't they come here talking about killing redskins? Didn't they import a bunch of niggas over here so they didn't have to do any work? Didn't they import a bunch of Asians over here so they didn't have to do any work? I mean, at least the Asians got a little bit of pay, but we didn't get jack shit. All we got was 400 years of slavery and another 100 years of Jim Crow, and behind that, we've been having to deal with systemic racism ever since, ever since the end of Reconstruction, through Jim Crow and all of that. Coming from upstate New York and having had to live through all of that racism, overt and covert racism, I know from where I speak, because I'm one of them brothers who did the shit the right way, went to school, raised my kids the right way, married my kids' mothers, um, didn't go to jail, didn't get arrested, none of those things. But it wasn't because they weren't trying to arrest me, they just couldn't. Uh, got passed over for job promotions, strictly based on race. And there were several times when I was off the record told that that was the reason I got passed over. All these things, man. And I was just a microcosm of what was going on in the larger society. You ain't even about to tell me America's not a racist country when you got motherfuckers like Joe Biden and Donald Trump and past presidents like Lyndon Johnson and Woodrow fucking Wilson and all of these other racist motherfuckers, as the leaders of the country. There's just absolutely no way. So my thing is, if you don't teach about race critically, how you gonna teach it? What you gonna say? That America was this bastion of equality and fairness ever since its founding? Oh yeah, we had a few bumps along the way, but by and large, America is just a country filled with really with love and happiness and equality. Is that what you're trying to teach? Is that what y'all gonna teach down here in Florida? In other words, y'all would rather have a country, right, filled with young people with a bunch of lies in their head than a bunch of young people with truth in their head. Because that's what you would rather have. Because you can't build a country like that. You can't run your empire like that based on lies. Because, lies just beget more lies. And so your whole history and your whole future is going to be based on untruths and falsehoods. I mean, take for example, and I'm going to go back to this because this is one of my favorite pet peeves of this country. Go back to 9/11. It's been almost 20 years since that shit happened. And some of the people that was babies when that shit happened only know the official story. And if anybody dug a little bit, and researched a little bit, they'll find that the official story is there's no way it can be true. There's absolutely no way it can be true. So we fast forward 20 years from now, you're gonna have a bunch of kids who think that the United States is founded on liberty and justice for all, and that there was no slavery, and that white people aren't racist, and that there are no. Is that what you're going to have? Look, let me break this down for those who don't know. Racism is not what most people say it is, or what most people think it is. You ask the average person what racism is, they're going to tell you about prejudice and bigotry. They're not going to tell you about. They're not going to tell you about redlining and Jim Crow and segregated militaries and racial covenants and being locked out of the GI Bill and the land grants and all of that thing, all of the things that came with the New Deal. They're not going to tell you about any of that. They're not going to tell you about. They're not going to tell you about how last hired, first fired. They're not going to tell you about that. They're not going to tell you about stop and frisk. They're not going to tell you about any of these things because they're not going to be taught that shit in school. They're going to be taught a bunch of bullshit and lies. And as far as I'm concerned, they're talking about how divisive teaching critical race theory would be. This country already divided. This country ain't never been united. That's just another lie. So they wanna run this whole country and bankroll its whole future based on a whole pack of new lies. Just like that lie about black identity extremists. This country ain't gonna have no future based. It ain't gonna have no future, any future at all, when you're trying to run it with a weak foundation like that, with a totally and completely dishonest foundation like that. In order to solve a problem, and the problem being racism and systemic racism, mainly coming from white people, you got to acknowledge that there is a problem. Not so? In order to fix a problem, you got to acknowledge that there was, and there always has been racism in this country. Ain't nobody trying to tell anybody that all white people are racist. All white people can't be racist because they don't have the power to be. But enough of them are. And the racism I'm talking about is racism that can affect your life if you're a black person. The racism that could keep you out of a job. The racism that could keep you out of a house that you want. The racism that can prevent you from walking through a door you want to walk through. Or rising to a level that you want to rise to. Because it only takes one well-placed racist to seriously impede your progress. And like I said, you can ask me how I know, because I've been there. And a whole bunch of people that I grew up with have also been there. So I don't know. I'm retired. I don't give a fuck. But the people coming up behind me, they setting themselves up for a rude fucking awakening. And if the United States ever wants to catch up with Europe and Asia, as far as progress is concerned, gonna have to come to grips and stop lying to itself. That's basically what the United States likes to do. It likes to lie to itself. It loves that shit. This country lies to itself more than any country in the world. The United States does. I mean, take all of the wars that have been happening ever since the United States was founded as a country. You got roughly 200 and what, 50 some years of us being a country. 200 and what, we'll just say 275 years of us being a country, give or take. And say 250 of them we've been at war somewhere. But at the same time, we're talking about spreading liberty and freedom around the world. That's another big lie. So the whole country, the whole foundation of the country is just one lie piled on top of another, on top of another. And the refusal to teach the truth about how racist this country is just the latest in a whole shitload of lies that our young people and children are being taught. I'm going to say this one thing, then I'm going to go. Talk to a young man at the place where I work, 22 years old. Asked him how much he knew about, he claims to be a really enlightened young man. Asked him how much he knew about 9/11. All he knew was what he heard on the nightly news. And all he knew, all he understood was what he heard in, say, the last, say, 10 or 12 years, since he'd been old enough to understand what they were saying on the nightly news. Well, they scrubbed the internet of the truth way back in 05 and 06 and 07. That's when you started seeing all of the truth videos being taken down and all of that shit being buried. So all he knows is the sanitized version of why we've been at war for the last 20 years. That's all he knows. And so when I started telling him about all the information that used to be out there and all of the things that really went down on that day, well, his eyes got big like saucers. He couldn't believe it. And I said, man, you got to dig a little deeper. Actually, you have to dig a lot deeper now to find out the truth about 9/11. But that's what's going to be going on, say, 20 years from now. When somebody asks about slavery, and somebody asks about Jim Crow, and somebody asks about the genocide of the Native Americans, or somebody asks about the Spanish-American War, or American War, or how we got into World War II, or how we got into the Spanish-American War, how we got into all of these wars, why we always at war. Somebody asks about the Gulf Wars and stuff like that. All you're going to get is the sanitized version. And so any child that leaves the United States when they get old enough and goes, say to Europe or somewhere, and they start getting told about the true history of the United States, they're gonna think that person that's telling them that is just a person that hates the United States. Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, the United States hates itself. The United States hates its fucking self. That's why it keeps lying to itself. That's why it wants everybody to believe this bullshit narrative about what a great place this is. And that's why we want to raise our kids to believe that this is such a great and wonderful place. Trust and believe, it's not. And teaching people the truth is the only way to make this country someplace that you can love. And with that, I'm out. Peace.